Hey guys, long time no see. I know I look a little bit different. I wanted to preface this by saying I did chip my front tooth. That's why I look like extra trailer trashy. And I just feel like I need to say it up front because that might somehow keep people from writing it in the comments or like making fun of me. So yeah, please don't comment on it. I'm really self-conscious about it. I don't want anyone to see it. But I couldn't get into the dentist to get it fixed until the end of the month. Not that you care. But I did get my hair done today, so I just want to like show that off a little bit. It looks a little bit off color because it's nighttime and I have like artificial lighting on it, but it is pink. It looks kind of orangish right now, but um, hopefully you can tell what color it is. So anyway, appearance aside, I know what I look like. There's no need to make fun of me. I do it to myself on a daily basis. It's okay. I do this pretty much every year. I think this is the third year in a row that I've done this, where I just go over every single book that I've read throughout the year and just sort of give a brief synopsis and my brief thoughts on it, mostly because I haven't uploaded reviews or anything of the sorts throughout the year. And I kind of like videos like this. Like I've been watching other people's 2018 wrap up videos and I have been really enjoying them. So I was thinking that I will just screen share my Goodreads page with you so then you don't have to look at my busted teeth. But there's a new live interface on here and I don't know if I would be able to figure that out, if it's still an option on here. Yeah, that is just the fun part of doing live videos. I don't see it anywhere, so that plan might be a bust. Yeah, there's literally no screen share now. Okay, well, maybe I can open it on my phone. I know that's what I did last year, and it's not really ideal for showing you the books, just because there is kind of a glare on the phone screen. But it is good because the mobile version of Goodreads shows you like part of your review if you wrote one. So that's kind of like a good reminder. Excuse me, I'm burping as usual. That it's a good reminder of what you thought of the book. So once the stream is over, I'll be able to go in and edit the description of the video. So I will put in my link to Goodreads and everything else, so you can add me on there. Okay, now I have to scroll to the bottom of 2018. So I had originally set my Goodreads challenge for the year to 60 books. I believe last year, in 2017, I managed 60 books. So I thought I could do that again in 2018, but this past year ended up being the worst year of my life, and I'm not going to go into that right now. If you follow me on Twitter or Instagram, you might have an idea about that, but because of everything that happened, I did end up reducing my reading goal, just because I didn't have enough time to put into reading, or I didn't have as much time as I did before to put into reading or listening to audiobooks, which is what I often do. So about halfway through the year, I realized that I wasn't going to hit that goal of 60. I would have had to read at least 5 books a month until the end of the year in order to hit 60. And it was pretty clear I probably wouldn't make that. So I reduced it to 50, and I still didn't make that, but I almost did. If you look at my Goodreads, actually, I don't think you can see the past challenges anymore. I'm not sure if you go to someone else's profile, but I can't see mine. I can't find it anywhere. I think it says 48 out of 50 in 2017. No, 2018. Oh my God, what year is it? But one of the books I have right here, and I wanted to show you first so that I won't forget, because this book actually isn't on Goodreads. So I actually read 49 books, but it's only going to show 48 on Goodreads is what I'm saying. So this book is it's an independently published, my nails are really ratchet too, so I'm just a mess right now. Independently published comic. It's like a short story. It's like a decent size, not too short, not super long either, but this is by Elk, and it's called A Whisper of the Sirens, and this is I'm not sure if it's a retelling or an original story. It says on the description in the back, looking for a cure to save his island, Callias finds himself alone after a shipwreck. So it's about Greek myth, and I found this online. I don't really remember how, and I'm pretty sure the only way you can buy this is through the artist's online store. But yeah, I just thought the art was so beautiful, and I'm always on a Greek mythology kick, but this year I really was, and I'll get into that later. But yeah, it is mature content. There's a little bit of gore in it, like body horror, and there's like a sex scene in it, like a male kind of ambiguous sex scene in it. So yeah, it's decent. I probably would have rated it like 4 out of 5 stars if it was on Goodreads. It wasn't like my new favorite, but it's nicely done, and yeah, I think it's just really pretty, really nice to look at. So yeah, not the first book I read in 2018, but I just wanted to put that out there first, because if I get into my whole list on Goodreads, I'm going to forget to bring that up. Plus, I forget what time of year I actually read that. Okay, so we have the books open. Let's see if you can see here. Can you actually see that? So the first book I read in 2018 was 3096 Days by Natasha Kampusch. And I think she's from Austria or Germany. And she's a little bit famous because she was a kidnap victim as a child, and then she was later able to escape after 3,000 odd days with her captor. And this is her autobiography detailing what happened during those 10 years that she was held captive by this crazy guy. And yeah, so it's nonfiction. I tend to read nonfiction about this type of thing, like autobiographies of people who have lived kind of like this abnormal, strange life. And I don't really rate them usually, because it's like giving someone's life a rating. So yeah, I didn't give that one a rating. But if you are interested in her story, or in like kidnapping stories, as like masochistic as that kind of sounds, I do recommend it. After that, I read In the Days of Rain, A Daughter, a Father, a Cult by Rebecca Stott. If you guys know me, you know I'm obsessed with cults. It's one of my main interests. That was so creepy to say. Yeah, so this one, not the most interesting cult memoir I've ever read, probably one of the least interesting. I don't really remember that much that happened. Yeah, I don't think it was super interesting. It was basically just a girl who grew up with a father who was a little mentally unbalanced, and he followed this kind of super orthodox church. I don't even remember what denomination it was, probably Christian or Jehovah's Witness or something like that. So yeah, I wouldn't highly recommend that one. It was just okay. So next up is Tithe by Holly Black. I've seen a lot of people on YouTube who review this book, and a lot of them don't know how to say tithe. Like I can't tell you how many of them say teeth or tith. Tith actually is the most common one, I think, but yeah, it's pronounced tithe, and I think it's Holly Black's first book, and I read it many years ago. I think it was like 15 years ago, 14 to 15 years ago. So it came out when I was a teenager. And for some reason, I left my rating as 3.5 stars on Goodreads, but I remember it being really, really good. Like my memory of it now would be like 4 to 5 stars. Okay, so I did leave a review, and I said, I really love the way this novel starts out. It's not afraid to be dark and gritty. Nothing is sugar-coated. However, halfway through to the end, it falls into some YA tropes that I really dislike. However, I'm still almost as intrigued by the world of the Fae courts as I was when I was 16. So yeah, Tide has a subtitle, A Modern Fairy Tale, and it's about this main character who's like a teenage girl, and she's kind of a misfit. She has kind of a strange appearance. Her mom is kind of shitty, and then she finds out that she's actually part of the Fae world. That's kind of a spoiler, but you find out pretty early on. And yeah, I really love all the characters in that book, and I really wish Holly Black still wrote like that, honestly. Oh my god, I just went to scroll down on my laptop when I was like supposed to be scrolling on my phone. Next one is Full Metal Indigiqueer. I think that's how you're supposed to say Indigiqueer. Subtitle Poems by Joshua Whitehead. And Joshua Whitehead is a Canadian writer who is, I'm not sure if you can say blowing up, like it's rare for Canadian writers to blow up, but I have seen him featured on like the CBC Books page often, and he is gaining more, I almost picked my nose, publications recently in the past year. And yeah, so I read this collection from him from the library, and he has like a very modern way of writing poetry. And honestly, I was intrigued by that because that was kind of like similar to the style that I wrote in high school. Like he uses a lot of like computer lingo and stuff, like chat log style poetry. And anyway, he is part of the LGBT community, and he's also an Aboriginal Canadian. So he writes from that perspective, obviously, and hence the title Indigiqueer. I rated the collection 3 stars, even though I did like it. The collection was just a little bit too long. It could have been edited down. It got too repetitive. By the way, I'm really exhausted. So this is just the perfect time to film one of these low energy, super long videos. The reason I always do this live is because then I don't have to import the footage off my camera, pull it into iMovie, edit it, export it again, and then re-upload it. Like that would just be so painful. Next, I read Sex Criminals Volume 3 by Matt Fraction. Oh, this volume is entitled 3 the Hard Way. And I rated it 3 stars. I only vaguely remember this. Sometimes when you're going through a graphic novel series, they tend to kind of like have typical dips in the story, and I think that's just because of the way the story is broken up. Like I'm not sure if it's for this comic, but most of the time comics here in North America, they're published by issue, and then the graphic novels or the trades are gathering a bunch of those, like 10 issues. And so like the story sometimes gets broken up in a little bit of a weird way. So that may have been what happened here, is that it's just a little bit anticlimactic. Sometimes the volumes suffer from like, sequel syndrome, like middle book syndrome, where like it's just transitioning to the next story arc or whatever. Anyway, next I read The Great Alone by Kristen Hanna. And so many people have been telling me to read Kristen Hanna, not in frame, for so long. And this is her most recent novel, I think. Yeah, I think it may have come out in 2018. And this is about a family who in the 70s, I want to say, maybe. Yeah, maybe the 70s, they uproot from somewhere in the US and then they replant themselves in Alaska because the dad of the family, it's a dad, a mom, and their young daughter. And the young daughter is like the main character in it, but the dad is very, again, like unhinged. He's extremely paranoid, super controlling of them. And overall, I liked this book okay. I find Kristen Hanna's style is very like appealing to the masses. You know, like her style and her books, the way they're published is like kind of pulpy, like mass market type of thing, which there's nothing wrong with, but you know, just throwing that out there. So I rated this one 3 stars because just so many ridiculously bad things happen to this character, that it's sort of like it almost seems like a parody of itself, the story. But it was fine. Like I enjoyed reading it. Next up, I read Ironside, A Modern Fairy's Tale by Holly Black again. So I read this series out of order, but that's okay because the second book doesn't really have anything to do with the first and third one. It's really weird. So Ironside, even though it's her third book in the series, it's technically a sequel to the first book. And I gave this one 4 out of 5 stars, so that's actually a higher rating than the first book. And I did write a review again. I said it was just too short. Problems got wrapped up too quickly. Corny's characterization was great. I'm a fan. Corny is the like best friend of the main girl in it. The ending was a bit cliche, but meh, it's YA. And I found that with another Holly Black book I read, The Coldest Girl in Cold Town. Like the ending was so cliche and stupid, and like the book was good, like kind of original and interesting, and then all of a sudden she like wraps up the story with this like extremely cliche like teen movie ending, and it just always like throws me for a loop. It's like, what happened? I just did the scrolling thing again. Ooh, next up I read The Hazelwood by someone, Melissa Albert. And I rated that 5 stars, and that is a big deal for me. This book had a few problems. I don't know why. I think this is another like recent release. It came out in 2018. But going into this book, I must have just skimmed the synopsis. I thought the main character in the book would be the mom, but it was actually the daughter, and it ended up being like a young adult book. I went into it thinking it would be an adult book. Anyway, that's my own dumbass fault, but this book, like, I didn't even know what to think of it for the first half of it. I didn't know where it was going, and then it just like amazed me. And the thing I really, really liked about this book is that the fairy tales in it, they're just weird, and their intention is to be weird. And like they flat out say in the book that they're not like conventional fairy tales where there's meant to be a lesson in them or like, you know, a warning to kids. They're just bizarre. And like this author in the book, who is the grandmother of the main character, she sort of built this cult fan base off of this whole idea of her original fairy tales that are just weird. And the whole plot is about the main character piecing together a mystery about her family's history. And it was exciting. I love the characters in it. Even though the main character is like this kind of stubborn, like jackass teenage girl, she's very realistically written. And her male counterpart in it, I really loved as well. At first he kind of comes across as like the stereotypical nerd, but then as we get to know him through the story, he has so many more layers and he's so interesting. and I like shipped them so hard, and I'm so excited for the next book to come out. It's been so long since I actually really, really liked a young adult novel, and this one, it didn't even feel like that much of a young adult novel because it was just good. It wasn't shite. So moving on, highly recommend that one. Moving on, I read Sex Criminals Volume 4, entitled 4G by Matt Fraction. Oh, I left it a good review. I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. I wrote, took 1 star off because John was being an unfunny dick at the beginning. Otherwise, a great volume, couldn't put it down. And then, oh my god, my stupid tooth. Why do I have to be so fugly? So I wrote, I sometimes turn these books face down when I pick them up from the library so that kids and old men don't see me with them, and also so the librarians don't see I'm the one taking out all these freaky cartoon sex books. But I just realized now that the back cover also has sex written on twice in big block letters, so my efforts have been futile. It's true, I do. I tend to try to hide the books that I take out from the library. I don't know why, but I just embarrass myself every day. Next, another graphic novel. I read Saga Volume 8, written by Brian K. Vaughan. Probably my favorite comic writer, not 100% sure. I rated this one 5 out of 5 stars. And Saga definitely, I can say, is the best graphic novel series running right now. I can't imagine there's anyone out there who's like interested, who reads graphic novels and hasn't read it. But if you're just getting into graphic novels and you read Saga and then you think like, oh my god, graphic novels are amazing, I can't wait to read all these, this is the best one. It's god tier. Yeah, I talked about Saga's plot in my video from last year. Saga is about these 2 people who are they're each from a planet that's at war with the other one. So it's like illegal for them to be together. They fall in love, they have a baby, and then the series follows them basically trying to protect their relationship and protect their child, with a lot of other like subplot things coming into it. And I wrote the Will's subplot is starting to become my favorite. I don't know. The Will is a villain in the series, but he I can't really say anything without spoiling it, but he's just kind of like an anti-villain, if that makes sense. He ends up being an anti-villain. And I really, really love characters like that, like the underdog type of characters, or just like straight up villains. I usually love. And yeah, there's everything in this series. It's obviously sci-fi. I mentioned it's about 2 planets, but it's very character driven, and there's really funny parts in it. It's another graphic novel like Sex Criminals where you can't really read it in public. Like I don't remember if it was that volume. It probably was, but there's just like a huge drawing of a dick that's like the whole page in it. So yeah. Oh my god. Okay, next up, I read The Cruel Prince by Holly Black. I read a lot of Holly Black this year. It was really hit or miss. I don't know why Goodreads says I've read this 2 times, because I haven't. I rated this 2 out of 5 stars. And I wrote a review, which I will read for you right now. I wrote, I'm upset because the last 25% of the book made me want to continue the series, but the first 75% was pretty much miserable. Yeah, I was super let down by this book. I got really excited to hear that Holly Black was continuing her fae or like fairy universe, like not necessarily the same things that were in Tithe or Ironside, but like stuff happening in that same universe. And in this book, the original characters from Tithe actually show up briefly, and I had a moment. I had a fangirl moment. But the rest of the book I thought was terrible. The characters have like basically no personality. Their motivations, like what I would assume would be their motivations, like don't show up at all in the story. It made no sense. Like the main character in it, she and her sisters are essentially kidnapped by their biological dad, one of their biological dads. And at the beginning, like the prologue of the book, he comes to their house and kills their human parents and takes all the girls back to this like fairy underworld. And like I would expect them to really hate him and like have a lot of complicated feelings about having like basically held captive and being raised by him, but they didn't. Like it doesn't show up at all. And like they clearly don't really love him, but it was kind of like there just was nothing there. And she has a twin sister, but they don't have like a twin relationship. Like if you guys have ever known twins in real life, like they usually have a very special sibling relationship, and they don't have it in the book. It's just like very bare bones, and it was just badly done. I don't understand how Holly Black's first book was so excellent, and then I don't know, she's just like crashing and burning with everything. So this is a series, the beginning of the series, and I think the second book is already out, which is kind of nuts. Like the first two books come out within the same year. Yeah, there's just like really shoehorned in romance in part of the book that is like very unexciting and I didn't care at all about. And like I wrote a huge review, which I'm not gonna read it for you guys, but also because there's like spoilers in it. There is one other character in it that didn't really get interesting till near the end of the book, and that's kind of one of the reasons why I want to continue it. But I haven't yet, just because it was so painful. So yeah, 2 out of 5 stars for that. Not the best. Oh my god. Coming up next, probably definitely my most anticipated book of the year. Picking my ear, sorry. Circe by Madeline Miller, or Madeline, I'm not sure. I'm insane. I rated this 4 out of 5 stars, but I even wrote in my review I might change to 5 stars. Looking back, I don't know. I need to reread it. There is just like one part of the book that, I mean, it's a decent chunk of the book, but I kind of just wasn't that interested in it. But the rest was so amazing. Like Madeline Miller, definitely my favorite author now. And a big part of that is like a bias because she writes about Greek myth, and that's like, my thing. And just the way she writes these is so amazing. She's, I'm not sure what to call her field, but that's like her area of expertise. She's a teacher and historian, I think. I'm just live streaming.
Oh.
And yeah, so she knows all about these stories already, but then she is it rewriting? I don't know, but she presents them in such a lifelike way and always really makes me like her characters. So yeah, I think she's kind of a genius the way she reworks the myths. So Circe, if you didn't know, is not just the lady in Game of Thrones. I think George R. R. Martin took her name from this original myth, actually. So if you know Ulysses, he stays on an island for a couple years during his Odyssey, and with like his sailors and everything, and he gets kind of enchanted by this witch who's on the island named Circe, and this is the book that's about her. And that's another thing I really like about Madeline Miller too, is that she's writing from the point of view of the other character who didn't really get the spotlight in the first place. So her first book, The Song of Achilles, which I reread this year, is about Achilles' like best friend and like lover, which again, you might expect someone would want to write about Achilles, but it's from the other character's point of view, which is very, I don't know, it's more interesting. And yeah, so I'm going on about this too much, but I really love her. and I love her books. So then I read I just read all of her stuff. So after that, I read Galatea. I'm not sure how to say that, and that's a short story by her. I rated that 5 out of 5. I think it's a Kindle exclusive, um, but yeah, it's really short. I think it's like 30 pages or just under 40. And yeah, that one's another myth retelling. That's the word I was looking for, retelling, not rewriting. And it's about Galatea's statue, a woman, and she comes. It's from her point of view again, of her coming to life and like her relationship with the guy that carved her. Sorry. And next, I was just on a run, so I was like, I read Circe as soon as it came out. Literally, as soon as it came out, I went on Audible every day, like multiple times a day, and refreshed it to see if the Circe audiobook was up. Yeah. So then I read Song of Achilles again. This is a reread from 2016, and I rated it 5 out of 5 stars again. This honestly might be my favorite book ever, and it is just because it's a retelling of Greek stuff, and the characters in it are so amazing. They're so alive, and she's just such a great writer. And yeah, it's one of my favorite books, if not my favorite. And I have to like hold myself back from rereading it because I want to read other books. But yeah, I could read that book like 4 or 5 times a year if I let myself. And I think this is another one that came out kind of recently, like in the past year. It's the Radium Girls, and that is by Kate Moore. And that's another nonfiction that I didn't rate, but it is about young women in the early 1900s in the US who worked with radium, and their, long-standing side effects from that, and lawsuits that followed that, because they were told by their workplaces and their bosses that they were safe, and they definitely weren't. And a lot of them died horrific deaths from the radium, and it's depressing, it's harrowing, and it's really interesting. So yeah. I think after that, I was so depressed, I needed to read something like kind of dumb. So I read, this is so embarrassing. I read Runaway Vampire by Lindsay Sands. And this is the Argno series, number 23. I've never read 1 to 22. I just searched like vampires on my library app, and this came up, and there's like a naked man on the cover. Oh my god, I look like a sick freak sharing this. You know what? I shouldn't have even rated this. I rated 2 out of 5 stars, but I knew what I was getting into reading this. It's so creepy. It's about this vampire who gets rescued by this like older woman. She's like 60 or something, 65, I don't know. And he kind of like imprints on her. If you guys have read Twilight, you know what I mean, how they have that like imprinting lore in it where the character will just like fall in love with someone, like, and have all these like flashes of like how in love they are and stuff, and they're like soulmates and shit. And it's like that, but he's like this like buff, like, vampire guy, so he looks like 21. And he imprints on this older lady, and it's so weird and cringy. So of course he like eventually turns her into a vampire, but she like reverts to being young. I don't know, it makes no sense. So of course I read more of the series. I'll get to that later. So after that, I was surprised to discover this book when I was doing the vampire search at the library, and this is Fever Dream by George R.R. Martin. That's the author of Game of Thrones. I had no idea he had written a vampire book, and I rated this 4 out of 5 stars. You know, it's so weird looking back at your ratings because I'm like, I don't actually remember what was good about this. I mean, yeah, it is a vampire book. It's about this guy who like invests in a steamboat, like this is back in the day of, you know, like Orleans, not Orleans, New Orleans, that, you know, when they had, I don't know what the hell, it's like American history. And yeah, he finds out that the guy he's like invested with or someone is a vampire, and he like unravels all this like network of vampires, and like I don't remember honestly. But my review of it was Anne Rice is shaking. Okay, next I finished this terrible book that I had started in December of 2017, and it took me 5 months to finish it. It's called Island of Wings by Karen Altenberg, and it sucked. It was really bad. I rated it 1 out of 5 stars. My review of it was horrific. That's it. It's about the main character is this lady who gets married to like a pastor, and they move to this outlying island off of Ireland, and there's it's inhabited by these native people, but they're like white people, like native Irish, and they're like heathens to them. This is like way back in the day, if you couldn't tell, but the pastor guy turns out to be a piece of shit, and he's just such a hateful, awful, awful person. And there's like no redemption arc in the story. There's just like all this awful, awful shit happening. And oh my god, I gave that book away. I donated it so someone else can have that misery. Oh my god, I finally gave up on this book, How to Make Webcomics by Brad Yeager and other other authors. I wrote, it's been 3 years. I can't force myself to finish this before getting rid of it. Dear God. Oh my god. Okay, so I have a webcomic if you're new here. So I've been trying to read this book, How to Make Webcomics. The thing with these guys is that they get outdated pretty fast. So this is kind of an older book, and that wasn't the only issue, where the authors of this book also put in on like every page their comic strips, and they were the exact type of comics that I hate. They're like all by older white guys who just do those like one strip things with like a gag, and they're so painfully unfunny. Like I don't have a good sense of humor, but like I don't find stuff like that funny at all, and it made me cringe and like throw up in my mouth. And yeah, I'm so glad I just like released myself from having to finish that book. I almost finished it. Like I almost managed to finish it by just skipping the comics and not reading them and trying to read like the actual advice. But the actual advice is just so outdated that it really is not worth it. I want a refund. Next, I wrote another awful book, When Dimple Met Rishi by, pardon my pronunciation, Sandhya Menon. I rated it 1 out of 5 stars, and my review of it was truly hateful. So this is a young adult contemporary book, and it was kind of making the rounds on like YouTube and like reviewer people, and I was like, okay, I'll check it out. Like it's probably just something fun, you know. And whatever. It's by an Indian writer, so there's not that many of those out there. I'll check it out. It was really awful. Just the characters were so dumb, and the parents of the main characters were, like, offensively dumb, especially Dimple's mom. Her only characterization was, like, pressuring Dimple to get married and find, like, an Indian fiance, and that's just I don't know, it's just, like, kind of a bad stereotype, so I really hated that. I hated that book. Again, I got that from the library. I get most of my books from the library because I don't wanna spend all my money on books. I spend it on my hair and my teeth. Next oh my god, I think I read this kinda recently. Oh, no, it's not. Okay, I don't know. I thought I was getting close to the end. I'm not. Um, I read Educated by Tara Westover, and that's another nonfiction autobiography, and I didn't read it. This one is really, really good. It is really another harrowing read, like nonfiction read, where you have to read about someone's horrific childhood and just like the senseless abuse that they had to endure. So Tara grew up with another. This is like a running theme in a bunch of these books, like autobiographies I read this year. Mentally unhinged dad who was very fanatical about a certain religion, but also extremely paranoid. So he didn't allow his kids to get like formal educations, and he forced them to do like really dangerous work with him. And yeah, so Tara is, I think, one of the youngest, if not the youngest in the family. And it's about her struggle to basically go to school and get away from this abuse. That's why it's called Educated. But yeah, it was really good. So yeah, I definitely recommend that. My rabbit's digging just to left me. I'm sorry if you can hear that. Next, I read Everything I Never Told You by Celeste Ng, and I gave it 3 out of 5 stars. I hear a lot of people talk about this author, and you know what? Contemporary just is not really my thing. No matter what like subgenre it falls into, I don't really read books to read about like real life. Like, no, I read books to go into like a fantasy escape world. I don't want to read about real life because I'm already in real life. That being said, I don't really remember what this book is about. It's about, I think, this family that's like an interracial family, I think. Like the dad, it's like another one that's kind of back in the day, like 80s or something, 70s or 80s, where the mom is white and the dad is Asian, and their daughter goes missing. And it's kind of just like a backstory about everyone in the family and like the parents, how they met and all this stuff, and their relationship and the kids' relationships and all this stuff. So it is like a pretty character-driven book, and I think that is why I ended up giving it 3 stars. And I did like get through it, and it's like fine. It's just there. Nextly, I read another poetry collection. It was The People Look Like Flowers at Last by Charles Bukowski. And Charles Bukowski, one of my favorite poets. He's an American poet. This is a big, like pretty hefty collection of poetry. You know, a lot of poetry collections are like this big. This one's like this. Again, it's from the library. I don't have it here. But I rated this 3 out of 5 stars. There's some amazing pieces in here, but there's also just like really repetitive, dumb things. Like he wrote this whole section about him like going to the racetrack, and yeah, it's just like very, very boring. Next up, I read another indie graphic novel called Taproot by Keezy Young. I said it was a sweet and lovely story with a touch of darkness. 5 out of 5 stars. Actually, more than anything, I really enjoyed the art style of this graphic novel. Yeah. It was really good. It's about this gardener guy. He works in like a greenhouse, and he's being followed around by a ghost. And it's like another boy, a ghost, and he's kind of like, ew, I'm so gross. Sorry. He's like, I don't know. He's doing something. He has to like figure out where the ghost's coming from. They just have like friend interactions, but then they like fall in love by the end of the book. Spoilers, but you can kind of tell the cover. But it was really sweet, not too long, not too short. Oh no. Anyone who watches this, like, you're a perv, because the next book I read was Captive Prince by C.S. Paquette. And this one is always, it's a series, but it's always recommended to people who have The Song of Achilles on their read books or want to read books. And like a couple of my friends, or maybe only one, had like recommended to me. And it's another like male man. It's not really romance, at least in this book, but yeah, it's kind of rapey, and yeah, it wasn't what I was expecting. It's not like The Song of Achilles at all. The Song of Achilles is super romantic. This isn't at all. There's no plot in it. It's just the main character basically being held captive and tortured for most of the book. And then he sympathizes with his captor by the end of the book. And yeah, can't relate. I'm such a loser. The next one is One Lucky Vampire by that same person, Lindsay Sands, who actually is a Canadian author. She lives in Ontario. And that was a weird experience where I was reading the books and she was like mentioning Toronto and all these places in Toronto. I was like, what the heck? Like, I didn't even know this person like lived in the same province as me. I didn't even write this one. My review was that ending was just hashtag sad. Sad. I don't remember the ending. So I'm pretty sure this one literally doesn't even matter what the synopsis is. This one, I don't remember. Anyway, it's another romance between like a human lady and a vampire, but the difference was that this lady was actually like not a senior citizen and she didn't want to become a vampire. Yeah, that's basically what each of these books are about, is like one half of a couple that's a vampire and one that's a human, except for one that I read. That's right, this is not the last one of the series that I read. Okay, next I read Theft by Finding, Diaries 1977 to 2002 by David Sedaris. And this is another autobiographical. David Sedaris is an American writer, and he writes satire. But in this case, it was like excerpts from his journals. And they were mostly funny, kind of like strange. I hate this word, quirky. I hate the word. And kind of funny, kind of sad, some of them kind of heart-wrenching. But that was my first experience with him. I've heard some good things, and he just released a book recently in 2018, so I definitely want to check out his other books, but I haven't got to those yet. Next, I finally read Snock Girl Volume 1, another graphic novel written by Brian Lee O'Malley. The art is really good, though. He doesn't do the art, so you might know him from Scott Pilgrim. He did that. The artist is a girl, a woman. I think her name is Jen Lee, or I'm thinking of someone else. I am. Her name is Leslie Hung. Okay, totally wrong person. Yeah, so I rated this 4 out of 5 stars. And yeah, I thought it was really good. Snock Girl, it's kind of gross, but she just has like allergies so far in the story. So she's like this really pretty, like really stylish fashion blogger, like super cool, like popular girl type of person. But she just also has like these allergies where she has like snot running out of her face that she's really embarrassed about. But then in this story, she gets kind of wrapped up in this. It's almost like a psychological thriller where she is being contacted by someone who died in front of her, but she was like hiding it. Um, yeah, not what I was expecting. I really thought Snot Girl was going to be like a really crappy, like superhero type of story, which I don't like. Oh my god. So next I can't get enough of this series. Can't get enough. Born to Bite by Lindsay Sands, Argino number 13. Wait, what was the number of the other one? Number 19. Okay, so I'm kind of making my way through the series. It really doesn't matter that I got it out of order. That one I think is two vampires together. And one of them is like a farmer, the guy, farmer vampire, and he has to hide like this other vampire at his house, conveniently, who's like a really sexy woman, conveniently. Next, I read Seductive Poison, a Jonestown survivor's story by Deborah Layton. And that's another nonfiction autobiography, which I made a rating for. I don't know why. I must have been really excited. I rated 5 out of 5 stars. But yeah, I did really enjoy this book. It's about the People's Temple. Is that what it was called? The Jonestown cult that moved to Guyana in the 80s, I think. And she got away from the cult before that big massacre happened there. So this is really a unique look inside the group because she was with it from the beginning. When it started, it was like a small church in the US. And yeah, this is kind of like invaluable research for me for my story that I've been working on for the past couple of years, which I want to make some videos about this year. I'm terrified to do that, but it's on my mind right now. And yeah, so if you're interested in cults, check it out. I don't know why I'm acting drunk. I'm not. Another graphic novel, Wildlife, Volume 1, by Pascal Lepas. And I kind of know her. We are in Valor 1 together. And this is her long-running webcomic collected the first few chapters in Volume 1. I rated it 3 out of 5 stars. Usually webcomics, when they first start off, mine included, they're pretty shaky. This one, it was fine. The art style, she kind of spends a little too much time on coloring the kettle black, but yeah, it's a paranormal story where the main character seems to be like just a normal guy, but he moves into a new house. There's a ghost hunting it, and then he gets involved in like werewolf stuff and some other weird things I don't really remember. But yeah, it's a long. I'm getting hit by my rabbit right now, punching me in the foot. Next up, I read a book I've had in my Audible library for a little while called The Clay Girl by Heather Tucker. And look at the cover. It's a really beautiful cover. I had this recommended to me by a YouTuber that I watch that I trust pretty well called Mercy's Reads. I think her YouTube handle is. Her name is Mercedes. And I usually have pretty similar reading taste to her. But I ended up giving this book 3 out of 5 stars. And I will read you my review. The writing style in this novel is amazing, poetic, dryly funny, and heartbreaking. The author of this novel, I'm pretty sure, is a poet. So, like, she wrote this novel kind of as like a one-off type thing, but normally she writes poetry, I guess. However, I took stars off the rating because some things about the story irked me. I really had to suspend my belief that a man. Oh, this is kind of like spoilery, but you have to read the novel to understand who these people are. As kind as Len would ever end up with a woman like Ari's mother. There's about 5 men and boys in love with slash lusting after Ari. I feel like in a mediocre written young adult novel that would be getting a lot of hate. Also, the ending was very unsatisfying and annoying. That was really annoying in this book is that all the males this character comes across, like, love her, like, really love her, but if it was, like, a regular, like, crappily written young adult book, everyone would be trashing it, but this one has so much praise because the writing style itself was really great. Okay, next I read The Nightingale by Kristen Hanna, same author I was talking about with that family that moved to Alaska, whatever the hell that was called. So many people have recommended this book to me. This book, okay, same thing I was saying where it's like pulpy, like mass market, blah 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 blah. It destroyed me, and I can't say that about a lot of books. Like this is only the second book ever that has actually made me cry like a baby. And yeah, looking back on it now, I'm like, some parts of it weren't that good, but it was really good. It's a World War II story, and it's revolving around two sisters who are really different. One of them is kind of like a stay-at-home mom, and she just wants to, like ignore the war and continue on her life as best she can. The other one is like kind of a rebel, and she wants to, help with the war effort, and she ends up becoming the Nightingale, without spoiling too much. But at the end of the book, I just cried for like an hour. And then I had a book hangover where I didn't want to read anymore for like a month. Like I didn't read another book for an entire month because I was so destroyed by that one book. But yeah, I did only give it 4 out of 5 stars. I think this is so dumb, but because the younger sister, often they're French. Should have mentioned that at first. They're living in France before World War II. Is it before? Well, they've been living there their whole lives, but then the book starts like at the start of World War II, I think. Before Germany occupies France, and then that happens during the book. What was I going to say about that? Oh yeah, the younger sister in the book always says "mon Dieu," and I just felt like that was kind of a stereotype. Like, I mean, I don't know like French people, but like the French people here, they don't say "mon Dieu" every 5 minutes. So yeah, the next book is a reread. I try not to do too many rereads. Like I said, like I'm trying to read like as many new to me books that I can, because I just have so many books, and I just want to experience like different books. Obviously, I'm really sorry I'm itching my face. It's my hair. So I kind of wanted to like comfort myself after like crying about the Nightingale a month later when I was like ready to read another book. And so I reread this book, Hope Farm by Peggy Frew, and she's an Australian writer, and I really love this book. I rated it 5 out of 5 stars, but in my review I said 4.5 stars. I probably talked about this. This came out in 2016, I think, so I probably talked about it in my wrap up from 2016. But this is another cult book, and it's in the early 80s, I think, kind of like that's when it takes place, is like when the hippie movement is kind of like dying down. And it's about this young girl. It's 2 point of view, so it's like a mother and daughter, and the mother character starts off the book when she's a teenager. She gets pregnant and sent away to I don't know what, like a nun place. So eloquent, where they try to take her baby away, but then she kind of gets rescued by this like hippie group, and she ends up, living her life with this hippie group, and the leader of them is this like narcissist, like sex abuser type guy, as they always are. I don't know why. Like, I mean, you kind of have to be a narcissist to be a cult leader, but why are they always like sex freaks too? But really great writing. I've not read many Australian books, so yeah, maybe should read more. That's probably one of my not like top 5 favorite books ever, but it's definitely in my like top 20, I think. Um, Again, probably just because of the subject matter I really am interested in. Oh my god, finally made a return to Anne Rice, the Vampire Armand by Anne Rice. I gave this book 4 to 5 stars. Realistically, I probably should have only given it like 2.5 to 3 because I only really liked the first half of the book, but I like loved it. Um, so this is about Armand, and he's actually one of my favorite characters of hers. If you've seen the Interview the Vampire movie, he's played by Antonio Banderas, and that's not accurate to how he is in the books at all. So Armand in the books is like 15 at the most when he's turned into a vampire. So he's frozen forever as a 15-year-old, which obviously Antonio Banderas was not in the movie. But yeah, this is another book where you're going to be like, you're a freak. Because Armand, he becomes like a student of this guy who eventually turns him into a vampire, Marius. And they have like a student teacher relationship where Marius is much older. And obviously Armand is like a young teenager. So kind of inappropriate, but it's also like taking place in like not ancient, but like, I don't even know. I don't remember the time period, like pre-Renaissance Italy or something like that. Then the weak part of the book is more like the second half, where we jump to more modern times, and it's obvious at that point that Anne Rice, I know that she personally has gone through this, so it's kind of like why it's obvious to me in the book that she has really, really struggled with her, not struggled, but she went through a long period of time where she like battled between being like a non-believer and being like a Christian, I guess. And that comes through in her writing in a couple of her books, actually like a handful of her books. She wrote like a whole series about Jesus and stuff like surrounding the Bible. But it comes through in the second half of this book where she just like wedged in this huge like plot where it was just about I don't know, her ideas about her faith and kind of like inserting them into the characters, which didn't make a lot of sense for most of the book. Okay, moving on. Oh my god. Unfortunately, next I read Valiant, a modern fairy tale by Holly Black. And this is that second book in her first trilogy I was talking about. This book was so horrible. I forced myself to finish it just so I could say I'd read all the books. I never actually read this one when I was a teenager, like when this series originally came out. This was my first experience with it. And it was just so hateful. The main character, Val, is just like such an awful asshole, and usually I can, I usually find a way to, like, connect to really, like, bad characters, and kind of you would think an author's intention of when writing like a bad or unlikable, that's the word I need to be using. Unlikable character would be to have them have like a redemption arc, right? Or just show some type of change. But she didn't really. And like there was this whole really inappropriate relationship where like the inciting incident in the book is Val like walks in on her high school age boyfriend with her mom, and it's just literally never addressed in the entire book, like how messed up and illegal and like disgusting that is. And like what happens with her relationship with her mom. It was just like, what the hell? How did that get published? I don't know. Oh my god, I love punishment because next I read Memnoch the Devil by Anne Rice. And oh my god, I rated 2 out of 5 stars. I think that's a little generous, but this Memnoch book is technically part of the Vampire Chronicles series. It's number 5. I'm trying to get through the whole series. I have read a few of them out of order, I think, but I'm trying to go back and just get through the ones that are in the middle that I haven't read yet. Like I read the original 3, and then I read The Prince Lestat, which is like one of the more recent ones, so I skipped a bunch in the middle. So Memnoch the Devil is, I have no idea why it's even attached to the Vampire Chronicles because it should be it should be more like in her like religious books. So Lestat in this book is basically, I think it's Lestat that was in this. I didn't say in the review, but yeah, so I said it's very obvious that this book is Anne Rice just grappling with her on and off again Christian faith. And only Rice would be arrogant enough to have her character interact with God himself, which does happen in this book, where basically Lestat is just being shown a bunch of the events in the, I was gonna say Old Testament, but no, then it goes into the New Testament with where Jesus like dies on the cross, and Lestat is like taken to this time with Memnoch. Memnoch is this fallen angel, and he wants to recruit Lestat to be like his helper, but then God gets all jealous and God wants Lestat to be his helper, and it's just really dumb. But I was intrigued by it because there are some like kind of interesting ideas and kind of abstract ideas she presents about that religion and the idea of like who has faith, who deserves to go to heaven, and that kind of thing. Oh my god, the ending of my review. The question of vampire versus menstrual blood is answered graphically. Yeah, she actually went there in this book. If you know Anne Rice and how she gets a little freaky in her writing. Yeah. Oh, I read quite a few gay books this past year. So the next one I read is The Paying Guest by Sarah Waters. Is it in frame? I have no idea. And this, Sarah Waters is pretty well known for her, I think she mostly has written like historical fiction, and they usually center around like lesbian romance. And this one, I gave it 3.5 stars. out of 5, and it was my first Sarah Waters book. I've been meaning to read her books for a little while. I really enjoy historical fiction, so this one, I forget exactly the time period. I think it was after one of the wars, because the main character and her mom they've kind of been financially marooned because all of the men from their family were killed by the war, and so they take on these tenants in their house, and that's kind of like how her secret relationship starts. And um, I enjoyed it. I really enjoy historical fiction, and I I don't know. I like reading about both like gay and straight romances. So yeah, that was interesting. I think I just took some of the rating off because I couldn't really sense much chemistry between like the two main characters. Like I didn't understand why they would like each other. They didn't have that much in common. So yeah, but um, it was good. It's not one of those books where if you only want to read like gay romances where they, you know, don't have to face any adversity or homophobia, and it's a really good ending, and it's no, it's not that. This video is so long. Next book, this is so boring. Start a Successful Business by Colleen DeBase, another nonfiction. I've been studying some business basics this past year. I'm going to continue studying business, just kind of on my own time. I was going to take business at the college, like a part-time program. And because I'm a teacher, I can take it for like $20, which is basically free. And I was looking at like all the course descriptions, and all of them are saying like very group work based. And I was just like, I gotta get out of this. I can't do this. Because in high school and when I was in college originally for animation, like group work is just a nightmare. No one does well in group work. No one likes group work. Why do they keep doing this? I was always that student that did like most of the work or did more than some other members of the group, and it's just not fair because those other group members are leeching off your work and your marks. Anyway, next one, another graphic novel I read, The Wicked and Divine, Volume 5. I talked about this last year as well. The Wicked and Divine is a graphic novel series about different deities. Like there are deities from different pantheons, like ancient Greece, Egypt, Norse mythology, and I think maybe African. I don't remember all of them. And in the storyline, the gods are reincarnated every 90 years or something like that, and it's really confusing. That was my review of this volume. I'm a little confused. But somehow I keep reading it. Like the past couple volumes I picked up, I've started reading it and I thought, I don't think I'm going to continue this. And then it somehow hooks me and I read it to the end. And I'm like, I'm going to read the next one. So next book, The 4-Hour Workweek by Timothy Ferriss. This is a really famous like self-help business book. Didn't give it a rating, but honestly, I was a little disappointed in it. A lot of it is just like common sense advice. Yeah, pretty let down by it, honestly. Still don't have a 4-hour work week. Oh my god. Finally, I read an awesome book, Cat's Eye by Margaret Atwood. And she's one of my favorite authors, probably my favorite other than Madeline Miller. This is another book I've had for quite a while, but I was kind of saving it like I think I talked about this last year too, how I kind of like savor books I know I really am gonna like. I might not read it right away because I don't want it to be over. So Margaret, you know, she's very old now, and I don't want to just like blast through all her books that I haven't read yet because then they'll all be done for me. Anyway, Cat's Eye is this super character driven book about this Canadian woman who grows up in the 60s, 50s, 60s in Ontario. And it's kind of her childhood's a little like autobiographical from her, I would, because she grew up kind of like in the wilderness for part of her life. Her dad was uh, entomologist. I always forget if it's entomologist, etymologist, the one that studies insects. And that's the same with this character in this book. And then when they finally moved to the city in Toronto or something, she's kind of like an outcast. And yeah, Margaret does this thing where she's really great at like switching between the two timelines where the character's present is like one storyline and then the character's past is another, but then they kind of like converge by the end of the book. And the main character goes through this whole section of her childhood where like her friends turn on her. She's kind of having like a hard time making friends because she's didn't go to school at first, and then they finally, move out of the wilderness so that the kids can go to school. And she's kind of an outcast, but she has these friends. And the way Margaret Atwood depicted their friend group was so like in depth and like realistic, and the way like the other girls would turn on her and bully her but then like convince her to come back, I was like, oh my god, it's so intuitive and like realistic. I don't know, it was good. Next book was The Wicked and the Divine, Volume 6. And yeah, I don't remember what happened in that volume. Just talked about what the overall concept for it is. Rated at 4 out of 5 stars. Oh my god, coming close to the end, guys. Time to burp. Next up was The Long Way to a Small Angry Planet. It's the first of a series, I think, by Becky Chambers. And you know what the messed up thing is I read a preview of this book a long time ago, like around the time it came out. I think it was like a Kindle sample or whatever, when you can download like a few pages of the book. And I thought it wasn't very good. Like the characters are very fan fiction-y to me, where they were kind of like stereotypes and they just had like kind of doofy dialogue. And I had multiple people recommend it to me, and I would let them know like, oh, I didn't like the sample, and they'd be like, trust me, just try it, like give another chance. And I did, and I ended up loving it. I gave it 5 out of 5 stars. It's a science fiction, but it's like soft science fiction. Like there's not really any hard science in it, which a lot of people, if you like hard science fiction, you might balk at that, and I totally understand that. But in this case, I really liked it. I like both like hard and soft science fiction. But this one, it's kind of similar to like Firefly, if you watch that show. It's about this like band of different crew members, and they do this like semi-dangerous job. And yeah, I loved all the characters in it, and I loved all their relationships, and I just love learning about all the like different alien species. So yeah, I really liked it. Next, I read this book that's in Chinese here. For some reason, I couldn't find an English entry on Goodreads for this. That sometimes happens with certain books, like if there's like 100 editions of it, you can't find the one that you're looking for, so I just added the Chinese edition. But this is originally a Chinese novel. It's called Ball Lightning in English, and the author is, let me attempt to pronounce the name again. I did read his books, I think last year or the year before, but I will try it again. Xiajian Liu. I apologize. But I picked this one up because I saw it in the synopsis saying it was like a prequel to Three Body Problem, which is another novel of his. He has a series, and that's the first one of the series, and I really love that series. It's hard science fiction, and Ball Lightning is another hard science fiction, but instead of being about like aliens and stuff, it's about this guy who his parents are killed by like a freak lightning accident, and then so he grows up to study lightning. And I ended up rating it 2 out of 5 stars. Looking back now, I could probably bump it up to 3. I think I was just disappointed when I actually finished the book that it wasn't really a sequel to Three Body Problem. There's just like a very vague like hinting at what happens in the Three Body Problem series at the end of this book. So it was kind of like false advertising that to say that this is a prequel to that series. And there's something kind of jarring in this book where like the first half or first 2/3 of the book we're following this main character who studies ball lightning, and then 2/3 of the way through the book this other character comes back and is just recounting to this main character what happened to all these other characters, and that's just like the rest of the book. And I was kind of confused by that, like why wouldn't you just work it into the plot where the main character takes part in all of that, and not just like he's being told everything that happened to the other characters. Like I didn't understand what the point of that was, but yeah, it is what it is. It was just okay. Not highly recommending it. Oh my god. Okay, another I think the term is like fujoshi, like I'm gonna look like a fujoshi after this. I read Call Me By Your Name by Andre Asiman. I don't know how to say that. So I was an idiot and I watched the film adaptation for this before I read the book. So then I ended up really liking the film a lot more than the book. But the book is worth reading because it continues on after the film. Like the film's ending is not the book's ending. Like the book keeps going on, and you learn more about what happens to these two characters. The film is so insanely beautiful. The cinematography in it. It's shot in Italy, and yeah, it's just gorgeous. The main character in it is played by Timothy Chalamet, and he is just like so striking looking that it really adds to the film. And in the book, I listened to the audiobook. It's actually narrated by his co-star in the film, Armie Hammer. So that's kind of weird because Armie Hammer is reading like from the point of view of Timothy Chalamet in the book. But yeah, the book is very sexual. Like there's a lot of like, yeah. Yep, I don't need to go into graphic detail. Oh my god, okay. Fairly recently I read this another nonfiction autobiography that is about a cult. Yeah, it's called The Sound of Gravel. I almost said gravel, by Ruth Warner. And she, my review of it is just that was terrifying. She grew up again in the 70s, 60s, or 70s in a community of polygamists, but they're a little bit different from the polygamists you see in Utah and stuff, like the Church of Latter-day Saints. No, sorry, not Latter-day Saints, those are Mormons. These are, like, fundamentalist Mormons. FLDS, the Fundamentalists of Latter-day Saints, something like that. So they're part of that religion where they're polygamous, so, like, the men get to marry however many wives they can, but this family in particular, they moved to Mexico, I guess, to escape, you know, the US government, and this girl's her biological dad is killed when she's a baby, and her stepdad is a complete maniac. Like I said, a running theme throughout the year about dads who are insane, like religious, fanatic, like mentally unstable father figures. And this book, out of all of the like cult memoirs and stuff along that vein, was the most horrifying. And I've read like a bunch of them, and literally it was so horrifying that I was Googling her name and like fraud or fake and stuff like that to try to find out if anyone had called this out as being fake or made up, because that is how insane the events of this book are. Like, I had to take a break for a while because I was like, oh my god, like her mom has a billion kids, and she just completely fails to provide them with a safe home, protect them from danger, protect them from abuse, feed them, and she severely neglects them. And I don't want to give spoilers, but yeah, I had to take a break from it because that's how like upset and frustrated I got with her mom, and just the events in the book were like what ultimately ended up happening was mind-boggling, actually mind-boggling. That's The Sound of Gravel, a memoir by Ruth Warner. Oh no. Okay, so second last book, I read the sequel to The Long Way to a Small Angry Planet, and it is A Closed and Common Orbit by Becky Chambers. I rated that one 3.5 out of 5 stars, and I really enjoyed this book again. For some of the same reasons, like the alien species are pretty in depth, and I really like the characters in it. What I was disappointed in is that we didn't actually catch up with the characters from the first book. Like, this is kind of its own standalone story, even though it is the sequel. It's picking up from the events of the end of the first book. Oh no. Okay, sorry. But what I liked about this book is that it was a little less episodic. I'm still losing my voice. A little less episodic than the first book, where the first book kind of felt like a TV show where there was like these certain arcs throughout the chapters where like, I don't know, it's really hard to explain, where it was like a whole season of like Star Trek in a book, where like there would be like a problem the characters have to solve it, and then it'd be like wrapped up in a few chapters, and like the next chapter they encounter another problem and they solved it, and then it kept repeating like that. But this one, the sequel, was more like one long story. And there's new characters, and the characters introduced at the ending of the first book and the new ones introduced, I ended up really liking them. Shit. And there's kind of this overarching theme in this one about AI systems, and how human they are. And I found myself reacting to the AIs in this story more than I had expected, where I was really like rooting for them and I felt like very human towards them. Um, so yeah, I really like books with that sort of like moral quandaries in them. So yeah, I'll definitely be reading the next one. And then lastly, finally we're at the last book, you guys. Um, Jesus Christ, excuse me. So this one I just finished. Oh, actually, I can't actually count that in this one because I finished it in January. I started it in December, finished it in January. It's Vox by Christina Dulcher, so I'll save my review for that for a year from now. So I guess the closing comment orbit. That's my last one. You know what? I was so busy at the end of the year. I could have just read like one or two more small graphic novels or poetry collections, and I would have hit my goal, but I literally just forgot to do that. um, so yeah, that kind of sucks. Don't really care ultimately that I didn't meet the goal. So for this year, for 2019, I have set a 50 book goal again. I didn't go back up to 60 just because I had to change it from last year. So I'm just going to be realistic and keep it at 50 for this year. If I want to go past 50, I can. I mean, if I can go past 50, I will. There's a couple books that I need to read this year. One of them is The Prince and the Dressmaker. I think that one is Jen Lee, that name I mentioned before, the comic artist. And I'm so dumb. I pre-ordered that this past year. Like that's how much I was looking forward to it. I pre-ordered it. I only pre-order like a few books a year probably. And it's a big graphic novel. It's like this thick. And it looks so good. I really love Jen Lee, and if that is her name. And I flipped through it when I first got it, and I essentially spoiled the story for me. I don't know why I do that. So now I haven't been as motivated to pick it up, but it has been optioned for a movie or a TV show. I forget. I'm pretty sure it's a movie. So I need to read it. Also, I am currently slogging through this book, The Savior's Champion by Jenna Moreci. She's a YouTuber. I really love her. I love her videos. She does videos about writing. And yeah, I pre-ordered this book as well. It came out in 2018. But it has been a little bit of a struggle to get through. My rabbit's digging again, sorry. I'm definitely going to finish it this year. I haven't read a ton of ebooks. I am reading this one as an ebook. And I just find when you're reading an ebook, it feels like you read a lot, and then you look at your progress and it's like, oh, I read 3% of the book. I felt like I read like half of it. And it's just discouraging because like at the bottom of like the Kindle app, it says like 9,000 something pages because you know the page is like 2 paragraphs. So anyway, no one cares. Another book I'm reading right now is The Road to Jonestown. So it's another book I'm reading for research for my story, but it's really good. It's by Jeff Gwynne. I think that's how you say it. And it's an in-depth look at Jim Jones and how he became the leader of the People's Temple. That's what it's called. So yeah, another good research book. What else do I have? I've had Anne Leckie's Ancillary series on my shelf for a while, and I haven't started it. I have all 3 books, and I haven't started it. Oh, and I just got George R.R. Martin's new book. He wrote, let me check my Audible account. He just put out, I think in December, a book that's a prequel to the Game of Thrones series. I think he said it's like 200 years before the start of. Oh no! I just pressed play. Okay, sorry. It's Fire and Blood, and yeah, so I picked that up on Audible, and it's the backstory of the Targaryens, so like the dragon family before they got, like killed and kicked off the throne. by the Lannisters. So I'm really looking forward to that. That's going to be my next audiobook listen. Um, yeah, super excited for that. Super excited for the Game of Thrones final season. And yeah, my throat hurts really bad now. So I'm sure no one watched this, but I hope you enjoyed this video. It was kind of a surprise. I didn't schedule the live or anything, but yeah, my next videos on here, I kind of wrapped up my sketchbook tours. So my next videos, I'm going to do probably, or next one is going to be like a comic update, like updating my webcomic style. Might do it as a live stream, I think. And then I'm going to do a video introducing my novel. So yeah, I will let you guys know when those are coming up. Thanks for watching. And yeah, if you got this far, let me know if you read any of these books and if you read anything in 2018 and if you liked any of it or not. Let me know. Bye.